to do and accomplish with the PSIs, give you a couple tips about how we're hoping they're being used in the field, and some ways to save time and some ways to emphasize the cadets' role in the use of these PSIs. So I see some old timers on this call tonight. So I know there's some folks who are out there who remember the PQS, the E2 PQS from about 10 years ago. You remember it was good. It wasn't received terribly well in the field. It was a little bit of an administrative burden. And when we were working on the practical portion of the curriculum, we wanted to make sure that we weren't adding more burden onto our volunteers. And so the first thing I want to start off with is a higher level comment, and that is our experience that we're trying to create for our cadets is meant to be a unified cadet pathway. Too often, I think our cadets experience three distinct, separate aspects to our program. There's the academic part, the old correspondence courses, the new Polaris advancement courses. There's the unit drills, and then there's national trainings. And those things don't necessarily match up or complement each other very well. And so that's one of the things we really tried to be intentional about as we started this curriculum process. And so the PSIs are meant to address some part of that, and that is specifically connecting the Polaris advancement courses content and learning with what's going on at the local units, and giving an opportunity to do a few things. One is to connect that learning and give an opportunity to assess the things that can't be assessed online, the saluting, the knot tying, and all those kind of things. It's meant to assess leadership performance and ethical behavior as well. And Dr. Johnson will talk a little bit about how we've made some changes to the PSIs to help you assess those things, rather than just that ambiguous question, are they living up to the core values, to actually give you some guidelines about how to assess that kind of thing. The other thing we're trying to do is to provide some guidance to training officers and to our cadets as well, set expectations about where we want them to get to at each rate, and to help training officers to decide, boy, I've got a crop of E2s and E3s, I've got a crop of folks who are coming up on E5 and E6. What are the sort of situations, what are the sort of training opportunities that I need to prepare and create for them at the home unit to get them up to that level? Obviously, we want to help our cadets to understand what the expectations are, but we also want to help the senior cadets who should be mentoring them. And one of the things I want to be very clear about, and Dr. Johnson will talk about, is that these are meant to be driven by the cadets as much as possible. So those of you who haven't experienced it yet, Dr. Johnson will show you the Magellan aspect. The main administrative burden to this is just clicking some check boxes. I don't want it to just be checking off those boxes, however. I want you to be thinking about those things and answering honestly, of course, that you can certify that your cadets know how to do each of those things. But we didn't want a big document that we needed 25 pages with 75 sign-offs. We wanted a one sheet for each rate, and again, low burden on the administrative side for our adults. But this should be driven by our cadets. And what does that mean? That means that our cadets should, each cadet who is striking for the next rate should be referring to their next PSI all the time. And they should be seeking out signatures and sign-offs as they are able to demonstrate each of the skills. Our senior cadets are empowered to sign off. The final sign-off has got to come from an adult. But each of those individual sign-offs, almost all of them are going to be able to be signed off by a cadet, a senior cadet. The later PSIs, as you can imagine, are going to get more in-depth and more complicated. So when you look at the E2 and E3, the saluting, some knot tying, crossing the quarterdeck, filling out a quarterdeck log, those are pretty low level, and obviously the cadets can assess those. As we get further in, we're going to be asking cadets to create lesson plans, to teach a class, to deliver verbal and then written feedback in an evaluation. Those things are either going to require sign off from an adult, or an adult better be training the senior cadets on how to assess whether that's being done effectively. But again, we want this to be as much as possible a cadet-driven process. We want to set expectations. We want to tie the different parts of the curriculum together, and we want to give some guidance to those to our unit level officers on just where we hope our cadets are getting. So with that high level overview, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Johnson and let him tell us a little bit more about the operation of how these are going to work. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Good to meet you virtually. First things first. So I'm going to ask you to respond to something in the chat for me real quick. Let's pretend I'm a cadet and I come to you and say, I'm ready. I'm ready to tie this bowline knot. And so I want you to tell me if I met the standard or not. So here we go. I'm going to try to demonstrate it as best as I can so you can see it. All right. So let's see. Okay. How'd I do? You want to pop it in the chat? Did I meet the standard? Did I tie a bowline knot? Uh-oh. Oh, no. I don't speak German. No. Who knows what I tied? You put that in the, man, we are, okay. All right, I didn't fool anybody. All right, so, excellent. Square, 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 okay, good. Yep, square, you got it. All right, so we know our knots. This is something that can definitely be assessed in the challenging environment that we have here, which is still, if we're not meeting, those are some things that we can assess virtually, where we can just have a cadet simply perform one of the indicators via webcam or over FaceTime or something like that, just to give you an idea of how we can do some of these things alternatively, so we don't always have to be face-to-face. So excellent. Okay, so let me go into real quick. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm just going to go through a few key things related to the PSIs. So everyone knows home port, I'm sure. And so we have a guide for the PSIs. And I know it's always difficult, to find where things are nested. So under the training tab, curriculum, and then we have the performance standards inventory guide. And so you click that. And we've got some information, just, what we just discussed, sort of where they came from, why we have them, and really what they're supposed to be doing. There are some things that can't be assessed necessarily through multiple choice questions and otherwise. And so we have to see if there is actual transfer from the online coursework to the cadets actually doing things in person. And so we have some recommendations for implementation here. Single point rubrics. It's a really simple, streamlined way to assess students or cadets based on very specific criteria. And so it's either a yes, it's either a no, it's either they successfully met it, or they didn't, or they exceeded it. And we'll give you an idea what that is. Magellan, this is also what the screen is going to look like, and I'll show you what my screen looks like in a moment. But all you're going to be doing is clicking boxes for each of the standards based off of the hard copy sheet that the cadet is going to be responsible for holding on to, keeping it, getting the signatures, getting your final signature before entering into Magellan. This is the E2 PSI, so E1, the orientation doesn't have one. So the E2 PSI, What we did differently, we rolled out some initial ones. We pulled back a little bit because we wanted to give a little bit more specific information. And so this will become clear in a second, but we have the standards here on the left. And then this is their location in the course. So you know exactly where to find it if someone is having trouble identifying what it is that they need to do precisely. And so a couple of these are pretty basic, that they're going to come from the E1. So that's why those are indicated here. We wanted to get cadets going through some proper military courtesies and customs, very simple ones from the get-go. And so that'll say E1, and you can find that pretty easily in there. The way the rest of them are organized, this is the course, this is the section, and this is the lesson that you can find the information. So for all of these, you'll know exactly where to go in order to find the information you need to assist cadets with actually performing it. And so that's the E2. And so these are going to be the same, these last two, for the most part throughout all of our rates, because these were important enough to repeat in terms of followership and leadership skills. They might vary a little bit as we get into some of the higher rates, but definitely faithful adherence to the core values, the oath, and the code of conduct. That's essential. And for these two, we've got these rubrics here to help you decide whether or not cadets meet the criteria. So faithful adherence to the USNSCC core values, oath, and code of conduct. So trustworthy, knows the rules, takes responsibility, treats others fairly, respectfully, and consistently. And you can say 1, 2, 3, 4, standard not met, partially met, met, exceeds expectations, and the cadets must achieve an average of 3 across. So you'll be able to sort of determine, and if you want to give them some feedback, indicate, you know, why you evaluated them a certain way or on a certain number, you can certainly do that. Same thing for demonstrate consistent follower and leadership skills. So takes and follows orders, follows the chain of command, responds to correction by changing behavior. And 3 other criteria for this, again, it wasn't met, partially met, it was met, and then exceeds expectations. And so that'll be the rubric, and that's going to be, if you print these out double-sided, this will be on the front and this is the back. Similar thing for E3. Again, this is the course, this is the section, and then the lesson it comes from. And then again, they don't have to do this all at once. We can have cadets doing this piecemeal. Say, hey, I think I'm ready for this. Let me knock this out. Can I just recite this for you a minute? Or again, like we did with the not, can they do it online, over the phone, something like that? Maybe you want to see them do it so you know they're not reading a script. And then initial and date. And then they can, whenever they're done, get your final signature and then the date there. These rubrics are on the back here, okay? The next screen will be the course itself. So this is the E2. This is sort of my view. It's going to look a little different from yours, but I did reorganize these. So it is section 1, introduction, lessons, section 2, and then within general military knowledge, there's going to be some subsections. 2A, customs courtesies, 2B, drill and ceremony, 2C, seamanship. And as you can see, these are all the lessons that go along with it. So when you need to find the information for the PSI, it's there. In the PSI manual itself, there is a screenshot of what Magellan is going to look like for you. But for me, it looks like this. Keep on the waiting room. So I've entered them all in according to how they are in the representation now. And so as you can see, they're all in there, they're active, and they're ready to go. So Seaman Apprentice is going to have 15, Seaman is going to have 13, and then once we've deliberated on what the next several rates look like, we will post those as we go. And so they will be in the system for you. And I think those are the 3 screens that you will need to do these. Again, we want to emphasize that we want the cadets to be in charge of this as much as possible. So if they have a hard copy of the PSIs with all the signatures on it, if they lose it, so sad, too bad, I guess, and they're going to have to get those signatures again. So make sure if they do have a hard copy, they keep it with them. Maybe they snap a picture with their phone every so often so they have a record of what they may have already done in case they do lose the hard copy. But we want to encourage them to keep the hard copy so they can collect those signatures, turn it in for your final approval, and then at that point, those can be approved or checked in Magellan. And so that is basically how it's done. I feel like it doesn't need any more explanation from me necessarily. So I think what we'd like to do then is perhaps open it up to questions. Maybe use the raise your hand function, and we can sort of unmute you and let you fire away. And I will stop share for now.
Thanks so much, Dr. Johnson. And right now is a great time if you have a question that you want to pose in the chat box, or as he mentioned, if you want to raise your hand, we welcome any questions or feedback that you have. I actually may kick it off if that's okay while others are thinking. Do you recommend now that this sort of becomes a regular part of the monthly drill, just building in some time for this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would, since you're only meeting once a month, I would build some time, let's say at the end, let's say last half an hour, it's going to be PSI time or what have you. You can sort of gauge at the beginning, hey, is anybody going to go up for anything today? Okay, well, we'll reserve some time at the end. And that's the time also that we want to encourage those more experienced cadets to actually do some of the evaluation as well. So it may take some training up in terms of making sure that you've normed some of your staff or higher level cadets that they can actually perform these as well. We're assuming that if they've gotten through and they've promoted to that rate, that they should know how to do those, but we want to make sure that we're all on the same page, all the evaluators, in terms of what these things look like and the expectations that we have. So I would highly recommend, if you've got some, group of E2 cadets that want to go up for some things, then maybe choose a leadership cadet that could take them aside and they could perform it for them, and they could have signature authority on that and sign off for you. So we want to put that on the cadets as much as possible. And since we can do it piecemeal, you're not going to have to go through like a karate belt test, 2-3 hours of assessment in one shot. You can do these a couple at a time when the cadet thinks he or she is ready.
Thank you. We have a question from someone asking if Navy League cadets will eventually have a similar, evaluation.
Yeah, it's really important to make sure that what you're learning online or in an academic situation transfers into reality, into IRL, and to being able to perform what you, through a test, say you're able to do. So the League cadets will definitely have their own as well, based on what they learn.
Thank you. We have someone else asking, what is the timeline for the expected petty officer standards?
Dave, you want to field that one?
Sure. So we've got PO3 is written and under review, the Polaris Advancement course. We have PO2 is getting there. PO1 is in the works. And we actually have more progress on Chief than we have on PO1 right now. But those are imminent. We're trying to get back on schedule to basically be publishing one pack a month. And as each pack comes out, the associated PSIs will come out at the same time.
We have a question about the scoring on the rubric.
Sure.
you mentioned that it needs to average a 3. Does that mean that they have to get at least a 3 in each category to get that line item signed off?
We meant 3 average.
Yeah, 3 average overall. You know, I'd hesitate to say if they have not explicitly met the standard, that they should move on with that. And maybe we should have a conversation about how they could bring it up. But average of 3 is satisfactory, sure.
Someone else is asking if prior to having senior cadets check off the junior cadets, do the adult officers first need to check off those senior cadets to make sure that they also have met those qualifications?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, it might be good to schedule some time to sit with your senior cadets and say, okay, we're going to norm everyone on the standards and what we expect. And so just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. And so it might be good to start scheduling that time as soon as you can.
Yeah, and it's nice to make it that unit-wide effort working together.
Absolutely.
Will the COTC be the person who signs off on that these requirements have been met, or I'm sorry, the CO, I guess, or will somebody else have that ability?
So the way that's coded in Magellan is whoever has authority in Magellan, should be any Magellan user, has the authority to input a advancement on behalf of the commanding officer. Commanding officer should have signed off on the piece of paper, or when it's time to get a Magellan, one or the other. I want to make sure that the commanding officer is certifying at some point that, in fact, yes, that every cadet has met all the criteria.
Another question about senior cadets being ready to evaluate. Will this type of evaluation be explicitly taught in POLA so that they're prepared for, evaluating the junior cadets?
That's a spectacular question, and that is a great connection of the unified cadet pathway, right?
Yes.
That the packs connect to the units, connect back to the training. And so I think I saw Master Chief Crawford on here. Barry, take that for action, please.
Fantastic. Will the cadet mentoring piece of the PSI program, I'm sorry, I'm repeating the question I just asked, forgive me. It says here that they have integrated the PSIs into their drills. They started last week and they're designating an academic PO and an assistant specifically to handle that. That's just
Perfect.
a comment.
Perfect.
That is, hey, yeah, that's good. Amazing.
And that's an important role. I used to, back when I was the CEO, I used to create billets to keep kids happy, but that's a serious billet. That's an important billet. I like it.
Getting lots of good ideas tonight. I love it. Someone else is asking, is the original sign-off sheet replaced by these ones that you're demonstrating tonight for the PSIs?
Yeah, we simplified them a little bit. And I mean, really, we're responding to folks' feedback. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, when we get advice, we take it and we make adjustments accordingly. So I think we're pretty happy with where they're at now. And we'll see what kind of administrative or assessment burden that they provide. But we're always open to taking folks' advice and making changes accordingly.
And I'll note also that the newer versions that are out, if anything, are less burdensome than the original version. So if you're worried that headquarters put out a new version and oh boy, those first kids were a little bit of a guinea pig, and they have our gratitude. But yeah, the feedback has simplified them a little bit.
And I also, real quick, sorry.
No, go right ahead.
I also think that, we've also inputted some choice because we know some units may not have certain experiences, or it's always good from a teaching and learning perspective to provide some kind of choice and autonomy to students. I use students, cadets interchangeably sometimes because I'm from education world. But it's always good to provide some kind of choice and autonomy over what they're learning and how they're assessed. And so If we've got 6 options, rather than making them 6 separate required PSIs, we can say choose 3 of 6 or something like that. So, you know, sort of give them the illusion of choice.
Great. And then in terms of a CO sign off on the final PSI, is that something that can be delegated to an OIC or to a training officer, for example?
That's fine, but just like your finances at the home unit, you can delegate that responsibility, but not the accountability.
Great. And then in terms of when we're talking about senior cadets who are able to evaluate, are we talking PO2 and above or PO3 and above? Or is that left up to the unit?
I'd leave that to the discretion of the training officer and the sort of training that they're able to provide their cadets. If you take a look at the E2 sign-offs, boy, I feel like an E3 should be able to sign off almost any of those. Right. When we start getting a little higher and we start getting into, you know, did you deliver your feedback appropriately? Was your lesson plan appropriately organized? Then again, we probably need more training, or we need to push that up to the adults to take a look at.
Someone else is wondering that considering that all of the standards for E2 are to be completed at recruit training, has NHQ discussed making this part of RT and having cadets return from the training with the completed standard in their service records?
The answer is not until you just said that. That's a great question. There's some concerns I have with that, and one of them is the access. Magellan has some quirks with access from the COTC to a cadet service record. The other is, you all know you have those cadets who have finished all the requirements. It's just graduation day at RT that they're waiting for. And if I'd hate for there to be any delay because we're waiting for some other piece of information to come in. But RT standardization is one of the things that's on our list coming up. And that's a perfect way to make sure that, again, all the different parts of the pathway are together. So thank you. That's a great idea. Sean, please take that for action.
And a little further up the chain, someone is asking if the CPOs also have to have these.
Oh, yes. Yeah. They're going to be pretty intense. And you all know that we're aiming to roll out Senior Chief and Master Chief. We're not rolling those out just because we can and they look fancy. We're rolling it out because we think we have the work for them to do, and that we can train them up to do it. And so those standards are going to be pretty intense.
Fantastic. And somebody else just wanted to share that they've actually been having their senior petty officers perform the PSIs during existing drills, and that they've been very receptive and have been told that it's a great addition to the advancement process. So they're really looking forward to petty officer advancements as well. Somebody else actually modified these for lead cadet promotions, which is interesting.
Hey,
sure.
We should get a hold of those. Yes, please. Curriculum@ccadets.org. Send them to me, please.
We will. Marcella Rawls. Once completed, what would NHQ like the cadets to do with the hard copies? Will it be required that these go into the cadet service record?
No, they don't need to go in the service record because you acknowledged them in Magellan and that's preserved there. Trying to eliminate the service record in the next year or two. So let's not add anything new into it. The information is recorded in Magellan. Let's leave it there.
Hang them on the refrigerator.
Can a cadet get these signed off while they're at an advanced training?
That's another great question. There may be certain things that can be signed off at certain advanced trainings, but for consistency's sake, I'd probably prefer to leave them at the home unit. Let me think about that, but I think for consistency's sake, it makes more sense to have that single line of authority.
Yeah, and you can recognize initials and things like that. Yeah.
We have a question about whether or not NHQ plans to digitize the PSI process where squad leaders can log into Quarterdeck and sign off PSIs for those cadets that report to them.
Well, I'll tell you what we want. And maybe there's someone on this call, and it's probably one of your children or cadets actually, who can do this for us. One of these days we need the Sea Cadet Leadership app on the phone, where all this stuff could be checked off one by one, and all the information could API back and forth to Polaris and Magellan. Right now, we don't have that capability. Is probably a little outside the scope of what we can handle right now with the quarterdeck. But we have a lot of grand plans here at headquarters to make life easier for cadets and volunteers. That would be one of the things I would love to do, but probably not in the near future.
Thank you. We have someone else asking when Magellan will be changed to reflect all the check boxes to acknowledge the completion of all 13 PSIs as shown on page 4 of the PSI instructions. Somebody did their homework.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, they are in Magellan as they are stated in the document. So I will double check when we're off the call, but they are all here in Magellan.
Thank you. We have a suggestion that when PSIs are created for the senior cadets, the most senior cadets, we should consider additional training integrated into OPD for officers to mentor them effectively. That's an excellent point.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes.
Karen, take that for action.
I will. That's for me.
I'm not going to go to these anymore if I'm going to keep getting assigned stuff to do.
We have somebody else just sharing their gratitude that we are developing this kind of wide range training plan, and they're just saying hats off to everyone. So thank you for that feedback. Follow-up question for sign-offs of PSIs. If members from other units are not allowed to sign off on that, then we probably should explicitly state that it should only be done in the local unit. Otherwise, cadets may take them to ATs for sign off. That's a really good point. Thank you for that feedback. Okay, again, somebody recommending that there's an app similar to the Navy Deferred Enlistment app to help with this process. So another good suggestion. Somebody else is saying that when they try to promote a junior cadet, they only see a single checkbox, whether or not they've completed the PSIs. They don't see the 13 performance traits.
Yeah, I'm going to check up on that.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that seems a little funny.
Okay. So yeah, a few of you are asking technical questions about accessing the PSIs in Magellan. So we will be sure that we just circle back and make sure that they are available to everyone that's applicable. So yeah, we have a few comments that somebody promoted a cadet recently and didn't see the check off. So again, we'll double check the IT piece on our end. I do invite anyone else who has remaining questions to please go ahead and submit them in the chat function. You've had so many good questions and comments. Please keep them coming. I guess while we're waiting to see if anyone else has questions, one thing that's come up is people are asking about the educational piece for the cadets themselves, so that they understand that this is required of them. And certainly we do, and I'm speaking probably out of turn, but we certainly hope that, you know, this is something the units will start to educate their cadets about. But Sean and Dave, I want to make sure that I'm not speaking out of turn, that we do plan to slowly roll out more education for the cadets themselves on empowering them to take charge of this process.
Absolutely. So the great suggestion about POLA is one place. The later packs will start talking about how to actually turn around and do some of this work back at your home unit. Just a quick note for everybody, which is these are like on the first or second page of every pack. So when you log on the first time to your E2 pack, the PSI is, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, it's right up front to download. So the cadets are aware, should be aware very early when they first confront any of our courses.
Yeah, it's right up front, and you know, there's a little tab at the top right corner when you're in a course where I can share certain files with them so they can have as reference materials, and so the PSI is one of those.
Great, and we have a couple of questions. People are only seeing the 13 performance traits for E2 and E3. Can you explain why they're not seeing it for E1?
Oh, there's no PSI for E1. That's just a quick orientation. There should be PSIs for E2 and E3 only in Magellan yet.
And then you will see there will always be one question or two questions for any advancement. It's just, has this cadet, demonstrated the appropriate leader and follower skills and adherence to the code of conduct. That should appear for every advancement.
Yeah.
Just to get folks in the habit of identifying, and it was required when we coded it. You had to have at least one for each. But for now,
Exactly.
you only see them as we roll out the Polaris advancement courses. So we're only at E3 right now. So you've only got the E2 and E3 packs right this second.
Will the PSIs become an annual inspection item?
I don't anticipate so, as they're connected directly to the advancement. So we're going to, again, try not to create a big administrative burden of collecting them in the folder and having the RDs review them. We're putting it out there as a tool for folks to use rather than something that we're trying to assess.
So since this is new and many cadets have already advanced prior to the rollout, should they integrate these PSIs for every advancement, even if they are advancing to PO3?
Again, from the administrative burden side, I'd say we're not requiring that. If you want to check to see if your PO3 can do all the things that that an E2 or E3 is supposed to do, I'm okay with that, but that's not a requirement from headquarters.
Could the PSI sign-off sheets be adapted so that there are signature blocks for both the senior cadet as well as an officer in charge, so that the CO can see that they have vouched for each skill listed on the PSI?
The font will get smaller, but we can, I'm sure.
If you're go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, you can sign next to it, or put 2 initials in the box, 2 sets of initials or something like that, if that's something you want to do at your unit level. Sure.
And we have someone else that's a startup unit and they're using a PO1 from another unit to help. Is it okay for the CO to give that PO1 permission to sign off?
Absolutely.
And
that's what we want them to do.
Yeah, thanks to that cadet for helping out. That's outstanding. Yeah,
yep.
Please.
Another person is asking where you find the PSI in Magellan.
That's a great question. You won't find them until you go to Advance a Cadet and you actually go to the screen where you enter the date of the advancement and all that, and then you'll be confronted with the list. Great question.
Fantastic. And again, these questions are outstanding. If you have more, please go ahead. Now's the time. Well, Deputy Director Hull and Dr. Johnson, apparently you've done an outstanding job of answering questions, because we're hitting radio silence here from the audience. So for future PSI rollouts, can National Headquarters please send an email to the COs so that they're ready and they're aware of them as soon as possible?
You deserve that. The answer is yes.
Yes. Yeah, they'll be released along with each course, and we're always sending out bells and whistles when a new course is released. So,
what kind of items are you anticipating to put into the higher level PSIs?
Sean, I'll take a crack at a couple of those. If you've got any others, add on. But at some point, we need cadets to do some planning. We need them to do teaching. We need them to give feedback. We need them to do evaluations. We need them to to reach out to the community. I hate to tell you, our Master Chiefs are going to be ambassadors for our program out to the world. And so there's going to be some things we're asking them to do that are beyond potentially the unit level and are impacting the community, the region, maybe the area level, coordinating training between units, gathering the chiefs mess together to address problems. They're going to be pretty heavy duty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, taking care of some key unit functions and demonstrating their capacity to do that at that level. E8 and E9, without divulging too much yet, but they're going to be large capstone projects. And so there's going to be a lot of performance embedded in those. And hopefully, we can get these capstone projects to have program-wide or national implications. I mean, these could be leading trainings, creating it from scratch. So there's going to be a lot of performance embedded in these projects from the get-go.
We have someone else asking if the senior and master chief PSIs will roll out before the actual ranks do.
So it's funny you mentioned that. We're intending to publish in the medium term a guide to senior chief and master chief, which is going to have every single requirement associated with those rates. So the capstone project, what that looks like, so cadets could get started on it. PO1s and chiefs could get started on that work right now if they wanted to. We're going to be rolling out a couple new leadership trainings, and all that's going to be announced soon so that we can get folks on that path. I don't want to hold anybody up. Anybody who's eligible coming later this year, I want to advance as many senior chiefs as we can as soon as possible. Those cadets that are qualified for it.
Great. We have somebody else with a suggestion that for the education idea leading to empowerment, that writing skills should be emphasized and possible tutoring take place in that area. So just some feedback. Thank you for that.
Well, yeah, as since we have thousands of cadets out there, I mean, that's just like a large school district, right? And so, we're assessing a lot through multiple choice, your assistance through the PSIs, but as the field narrows, especially with chiefs, senior chiefs, master chiefs, we're going to be able to require more of them, and we're actually going to be able to score and grade some real products here. So that's definitely going to help.
Another adult volunteer is wondering that if a cadet joins at 14, do we envision that they would still have time to make E8 or E9?
That'll be tight. That'll be tight. So I'll tell you from headquarters, about half of the cadets who are advanced to chief are 16 years old, and almost 20% of our chiefs are advanced on or about their 16th birthday. And so there's a significant group who have a year and a half or more as a chief petty officer. And with the 6-month time and grade for each, we will have a significant group. The reality is about half of our chiefs will probably be eligible for senior chief, and about half of them will be eligible for master chief. So yes, folks are going to run out of time, but that means they just need to keep up with the advancements on the way up, and we need to support them in that. But we're not looking to reduce any of the requirements on the bottom end either. Trying to make sure that these are we're screening for the cream of the crop.
Another recruiting tool for Navy League. The Naval Academy application recognizes Sea Cadet participation, and someone is suggesting that that you also have the option to select rank and possibly LPO position. So with the new higher chief ranks, is that something that headquarters is going to talk to the Naval Academy about?
Sorry about that. We can absolutely, and we have, I expect we're going to have some additional entree to the Naval Academy coming pretty soon. And so we already have a great relationship over there. We're sending a massive amount of cadets every year to the Naval Academy. And so given those numbers, they're interested in talking to us. On a related note, I'm also trying to get Navy Recruiting Command to add a specific question on the DD form 1966 to specify that folks were a Sea Cadet as opposed to just having been in a military youth group.
That's great. We also have someone asking if units will have a maximum number of senior or master chief positions.
That's a good question. And so again, the old salts on the call tonight will remember the limits we used to place on chiefs and PO1s and all that. And you'll also remember that every single waiver was granted on those limits, and that's why we removed them. We're contemplating limits for senior chief and master chief, but want to make sure we don't just end up in that same position where we go, oh, well, the kid worked so hard, and how could we hold it back from her? So we want to be realistic about what it will look like on the other end, but that's come up several times.
For cadets that are making E9, E8, or even E7, is there any possibility for adjustment to the Navy recruitman, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, for them to enter the Navy at E4?
I don't believe the crew comm instruction has any pathway to E4 out of RT, and so that would be a pretty tough sell. That would be a new policy invented just for us. I'm happy to push those kind of things, but I don't believe there's any other pathway to get that, college or anything. So that would be a tough sell. Love to do it.
Will something like a force senior master chief for regions be considered?
Well, it's funny you asked that. When we asked the Navy to adjust the OPNAV instruction, which used to restrain the cadet rates to E7, the new instruction does not have any limitation on cadet rates. And so it is possible, again, we haven't made any such decision. The topic has come up. Should there be a region master chief, area master chief? What about the McPosk, right? The master chief petty officer of the Sea Cadets. The problem with those positions is those cadets are generally eligible to fill them for about 5 months. And so the danger being the constant turnover, that it'd be tough to get them up to speed for the level of responsibility that we're talking about. So again, it's not impossible, but it's not in the plan right this second.
Okay, thank you. Again, we're at the end of our inquiries. If anyone has any last minute questions they want to share, please go ahead and put them into the chat. And while we allow time to do that, this might be a good wrap-up opportunity for Deputy Director Hull and Dr. Johnson. Again, what are your sort of top 3 steps as a unit to kind of get the ball rolling on this? I know we've covered a lot of territory, but coming out of tonight, what would you direct them to do? Dr.
Johnson?
Yeah. I guess for me, as a former educator, I guess current, but former, I would focus on making sure I'm comfortable with them first. And that's something that I would do because really you can't teach what you don't know. And so I would make sure that I'm comfortable with doing everything, comfortable, perhaps teaching others, giving them advice and supporting them in the process. So I would start with myself. And then I would work on developing a cadre of, evaluators with your senior cadets and find some time to work with them a little bit and going through some of the PSIs and sort of demonstrating and modeling for them how to do this and what your expectations are for each of them. And then start building some time in your unit drills at your home unit, half an hour or so here and there to talk about them. Maybe the predictability is important. So maybe the last half an hour they know is going to be PSI time or something like that, where you go over some things, maybe roll out some of the seamanship PSIs and just give an overview, roll out some of the customs and courtesies, maybe spend 15 minutes on the drill ones at certain drill weekends. That's what I would start. Just start, your individual comfort and then how this is going to look organization-wise at your unit.
That's great. And Deshaun, my only follow-up to that is, again, if we're going with the top 3, it's please remember this is about integrating the different parts of the pathway and and making sure that what the cadets are learning in one place is being reinforced in the others. The second one is that this really, really, really should be cadet driven as much as possible. And so again, that requires us and you as our volunteers to train. And so to train your cadets, your senior cadets, make sure they know how to do it, and then make sure they can assess it. And the last one is to take this as an opportunity to, again, set expectations both for the individuals and for the unit. Where should we be heading? Now that we're, your startup units out there, you've got that PO1 helping, and you've got a bunch of E1s. And so you've got a fairly straightforward path. I got to get all these E1s up to these standards for E2. But for the big thriving units out there, where you've got someone E1 to E7, from LC1 up to E7, you've got a lot of different paths that your cadets are on. These are designed to help the training officers to think about what they need to set up to help these cadets succeed.
And we have some folks asking, so many units have just not met in person for months and months and months, or many cadets haven't had a chance to be at an in-person training. So several of the items on some of the PSIs, they literally just have not been able to experience. They've learned about them perhaps through a pack or other, what are your suggestions there?
I mean, for me at the top of it, they could do a knot over Zoom, FaceTime, Google Meets, something like that. We can take advantage of what digital platforms are available. We have to be flexible. I mean, some of the drill maneuvers, they can salute. You'd be surprised what young people can do with their phones. So, they could focus their camera on their feet, something like that. We just got to be flexible and as accommodating as possible.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice.
And please remember, when you have, when you're assessing a cadet, there are no one-on-one interactions in this program, including virtual. And so there needs to be another grown-up on that Zoom call or whatever FaceTime or whatever it is, just watching, please. Thank you.
Good reminder. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we do have one last question, which is, are we expected to edit prior promotions for current POs for their previous E2, E3, and Magellan?
No.
Okay. No, the standards are rolling, and so you better bet, what your PO3, how your PO3 gets promoted in April could be different from how your PO3 is promoted in May. And so we're asking for patience and flexibility from everybody as these changes roll out, and we're grateful for everybody for sticking along, learning about it in webinars like this, and giving the feedback to us to make them better.
Great. And then we have a question from someone asking about cadets that are having issues with exams, and maybe some questions that they're struggling with. What's the best path forward, and how should they address those?
Curriculum@ccadets.org.
Great.
Any technical related to the packs, screenshots are really helpful, so I can see what they see. So send those to me. And then while we're starting to roll these things out, while they're still nascent or in their infancy or what have you, relative infancy, we can give you some. I can give you some suggestions or recommendations for how, from an instructional standpoint, how to maybe support. Because we don't want the kids to constantly not pass the exams and attempt after attempt after attempt. It's just demoralizing, right? So if there's anything that I could suggest from an educator's perspective about how to support them in understanding the content, I put up some note-taking sheets that they can use. They may have to take, make multiple copies in case they, have a lot to write. There are some accommodations for screen readers, magnifying to make the text pop a little bit easier, Screencastify. So there's apps out there that help read the screen for them. That can always be a help as well. So just send some things my way, and that always helps me design things better if I hear about some individual cases. So.
That's great. And just want to mention that we do have a tips for success sheet for the PACs available on Homeport. And I absolutely encourage our adult volunteers to familiarize yourself with the kind of things that Dr. Johnson was just describing, as well as some other ways to just help the cadets set themselves up for success. So that's definitely something I think you'll find useful. At this point, we are coming up to the top of the hour, and I don't see any other questions. Want to just thank you all so much for your time this evening and your dedication to your units. This is Volunteer Appreciation Week, and here you are giving more of yourselves to the benefit of the cadets. And we could not do what we do without all of you. So thank you, thank you. Please, let's keep the conversation going. As Dr. Johnson pointed out, any follow-up questions, send them to curriculum@ccadets.org. Again, I thank you so much for your time. I thank Deputy Director Hull and Dr. Johnson, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, everybody. Good night. Appreciate it.
Good night.
Good night.